So basically, you had you put up, what was it, last week, a couple weeks ago?
I think almost 2 weeks now, December 29th. I think I looked it up the other day because I was trying to figure out when. So to give you the
When you lit the
backstory,
universe on
I was just
fire.
I was just trying this idea of if I typed a post in my notes and took a picture and put it up, what would happen? And so I had just read another just lift heavy shit
Yeah,
posted,
yeah, yeah.
which is
That was a good pun,
constant
by the way.
barrage.
Just that was a good pun. But go ahead.
And then so I said, okay, I'm so tired of this. And so I just wrote whatever I wrote, 5 to 10 reps is fine for adult training, or something that I thought was pretty innocuous, to be honest. I didn't think anybody would even comment or that they would be. And then I started looking at the views, and I probably had 10,000 views in the first 30 minutes. And I thought, that's bizarre. That's like a whole day sometimes of a different post. And then it kept going and going, and then suddenly the trolls were out, and it was just crazy.
It was amazing. And as a fan of Mike Boyle, I was just cheering for you in the background. It's funny because they have been going after the you don't need to lift 1 to 5 reps, right? The post that you put up was 5 to 10 reps done to failure is heavy enough. The risk of 1 to 5 reps is not worth the reward for adults. So you even qualified it with adults. And the thing that I would go after in that post, if I were to do that, is, and this is a question I want to talk about, do you ever need to go to failure? It wasn't the 1 to 5 rep range, right? So that's I was surprised when I looked at the quote, when I went back and like picked this up. I was surprised that the issue was the 1 to 5 reps. It wasn't the failure thing. So I think it's a perfectly this normal statement that one could make, especially if you qualify it for adults, and yet it was just like lighting the universe on fire.
Exactly. And so the failure part, here's my thought process with the failure part. I think with a lot of, because I was talking specifically, and that's why I said adults. I'm talking about the adult fitness population. I'm not talking about you or me who's been lifting weights. I lifted weights. I haven't lifted weights in a long time, but I did lift weights at one point.
I'm still
You've
trying.
been
I'm
continuing
still
to lift
going. I'm
weights.
still going strong.
When you talk about people that know what they're doing, if I said to you that, because you would ask about, if I said to you, I want 1 rep in reserve, I want 2 reps in reserve, I want failure, whatever it is, you would know exactly what that meant.
Correct.
And you would
Through
be able to
hundreds of
do
reps.
exactly what I wanted. Right. But what I'm trying to get these people to understand is we are not our clients. And so when I say to failure or close to failure, I want you to try to get as many as you can get, because most people, the average person, has probably never tried. So someone might think I can do this for 5, but if I said to you, Rich, I'll bet you $10 that you can do it for 10.
Give me no, yeah.
Right. So I think that's the failure part. This is not like Mike Menser heavy duty. This is not, we're gonna do forced reps. This is just, let's try to get somebody near the end of their productive range. The point where you look, because again, if you're an experienced coach, same thing, and I'll put you and I in the same boat, right? You could watch a set, and if I said to you, okay, we're going to sit in a soundproof room, and I'm going to say, how many reps does that guy have left?
Yeah.
We're just going to say he's going to try to do a 10 rep set. You would look and say 4, and I might be 4. You're right.
Yeah.
You might say 3, and I'm like, I don't know, I think he'll get 4. But we'd be within a rep.
Yeah.
Just looking observationally, you would know exactly what you were looking at. That's not what we're dealing with when we start talking about people in adult fitness. And I think this is one of the reasons that it gets so confused, is that these people, and they're I don't love the book, The 4 Agreements, but I love the 4 Agreements. Is that strange? But right. One of the things they say, don't take things personally. People, they personalize this thing. And this is what got us into round 2, was that every troll was male.
This is amazing.
Every troll was either a power lifter or an Olympic lifter. Every troll had either a shirtless picture or a tank top picture, or multiple shirtless,
or the trifecta. The trifecta you said, which is a shirtless picture of you squatting or deadlifting.
Yes, but and honestly, it was. I said it was one of the guys I said today got mad at my post today, and I said, it's like fishing with a flashlight. You guys just come out. Like I don't even have to try. I just
Yeah.
have to say something, and these people are going to come running out screaming. Somebody actually dubbed it Boyle derangement syndrome the other day,
Oh,
which I thought
nice.
was really funny.
Well, it's funny to go back to your basically your issue with, or the idea that your clients don't know their limitations. And this is really weird because on Monday I released a blog and it was the problem with RPE and RIR. And that's because they have no clue what they're actually capable of doing. And I tell a story. When I was an athlete, a freshman at Ashland, I remember I'd get down to the squat set, and if you asked me how many more you could do, I had no idea. And Judd Logan would look over at me and he'd be like, "All right, put 10 more pounds on, or do this, but next one get 4." And I would just do it, and I was like, "Oh, how the hell did he know that?" And he's just seen, like you, thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes doing reps. And it took, I don't know how long, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years to really know the limitations. So while I love the concept behind, reps in reserve or, rate of perceived effort, it assumes that the client or the athlete has any clue what their actual limitations are. So your idea,
That was
yeah, go ahead.
that was my point exactly. Is that you look at that and think these people are not. And I've had this argument. With sport coaches, even team sport coaches, where they're mad at the players, and I have to remind the sport coaches they're not like us. They're just really highly talented people. They don't think the way that we think. It's not an apples to apples comparison, and it's just that way. And particularly, and this is my thing with adult fitness, we have 400 adult fitness clients. So we have 400 people who train in our small group setting at least twice a week. We probably have another 150 personal training clients who train individually or in smaller, groups of 2 to 3 at least 2 times a week. We're seeing literally hundreds and hundreds of people a day, and we're trying to develop a system that works for them. And like I said, I don't think, and it was whoever the barbell medicine guy, I don't even know what his name is, but he said, I've coached as many people as Mike Boyle. And I was kind of like, you look a little young to have coached as many people as Mike Boyle. You would have had to have been you're 20 years younger than me, which means you would have had to work really hard the first 20 years of your career, because I was a college strength and conditioning coach.
Maybe he's a high performer and he's been doing he works for 20 hours a day or something like that. Who knows? I doubt it.
Yeah, no, maybe, but I honestly don't believe that for a second.
No,
these are the kind of people who are out there.
Yeah, I mean, so the couple questions I have, because I think this is an interesting statement. So my first one, I don't necessarily think it's funny, because I agree with everything you're saying, and I have not issues, but I could kind of push back at each one of these points. So for me, let's start off with to failure. So I don't necessarily think that an athlete or a client, an adult client, needs to go to failure. I completely grant that you're 100% right that they don't know. So I want to talk through that. You're trying to get them into an effective dose in terms of intensity, and you do that, or correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, you do that by sort of pushing them a little farther than they maybe thought capable. And then you get them into that, that yellow zone where they're working hard enough to get gains, but not so hard that they get injured. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And you're doing that with the failure thing. I think when people hear this, and when I was typing this out, I'm thinking of like me going in and doing 10 reps to failure. Well, I've done failure work, I don't know, for 30 years or whatever, and it's a different scenario. So talk to me about how you're working them through that to failure, because you're not, you don't want them like collapsing in the rig, and maybe even talk about, is this exercise specific? You don't need them to do this with every exercise, or do you? Are there certain periods where you want them to go to failure? Just talk to me through it, because I love that idea, because you need to push them a little harder to get the gains that they're looking for. And pushing, someone that just comes in twice a week, that's, sitting at a desk 40 hours a week and has started exercising in their late 30s because they were feeling like shit, and now they want to just get in better shape. That's a wildly different scenario than, you've got a professional athlete that's been doing this for, 15 years and have pushed themselves to the limit many, many times. So talk to me about how you do that and how you safely navigate pushing them into that range.
Well, I think one, you go back to the old Apollo idea, technical failure. I think that's what we're really looking at. If we were going to be specific, technical failure, when you can no longer do another rep the way
No.
that I believe all of the reps should do. Like I can look at that set again. If I said to you, same scenario, right? We're going to watch the set and I'm going to say, okay, when you see technical failure, raise your hand. I'm going to guarantee you and I are going to raise our hand at the exact same moment. We're both going to be like, right there, that was it. Good, rack the bar, whatever it is. Put the weights down, you're done. So it's just that idea of we want them. I think the average person, the average adult fitness person probably does not push themselves hard enough.
No, I
I
agree with
think
you.
CrossFit was the reverse, right?
Mhm.
CrossFit literally crossed the line when you think maybe that's what the cross and CrossFit was supposed to be for. But when you think about them just saying, okay, just do as many reps as you can do, no matter how shitty they get, like whatever they look like, just keep going until you can't move anymore. And I would look at that and think, nope, that's not what I want at all. So I guess, and maybe again, if we had, it's kind of like with Twitter, with Instagram, you have X amount of space, right? Maybe I should have said to technical failure, and maybe that would have made some of these trolls feel better. But my point is that if somebody pushes themselves hard to the point where, okay, I don't think I can get another one. And I looked at it and thought, I don't think you can get another one either. We're good. That's the end of today's sort of designated heavy set. Because I don't know if it was you or somebody else made the comment. They said, it seems awful, Mike Menser, like we're probably closer to hit than we are to like West Side. Do you know what I mean? Like we're probably doing 1 to 2 work sets in most situations. And some of that is a product of me believing in that system that I think well, and again, this is another whole story, but most people base what they're doing on either Olympic lifters or power lifters who are steroid users who are doing an entirely different type of training than what a normal person would be doing. Yet people look at those. That's like, I used to get people, and they'd be, I can remember guys arguing about like Shako versus Smolov squat cycles. And I would just be like, this is the most like useless esoteric argument in the history of the world in terms of, I'm just thinking, hey, do 10 good reps and next week we'll do 5 pounds more than that. Do you know what I mean? And that's another post. I actually have, that one's not up yet, but I basically have a post put up and it said, if I said to you, Rich, we're going to start this week with the bar and I want you to just do the bar for 10 reps. And then next week, we're going to add 5s. Actually, no, we're going to add 5s. We're going to have 2.5s.
Is it Keynesian or Keynesian principle that Paul talked about a little bit? Where you're just adding
Kaizen. Yep, Kaizen.
it's
But it's that idea, right?
Kaizen.
With Kaizen,
Kaizen. Yep.
Kaizn,
Yep.
continuous improvement, right? But if we just said, what you don't realize is that if you did that for a year, I mean, you can do math, I can do math, right? I believe that it would be 5 times 52, right? Which is 260 plus 45. You would theoretically bench 305 for 10 at the end of year one, simply by putting the 2.5s on. And okay, 50. Okay, next week we're going to go to 55. So my other thing is, why are you in such a freaking hurry? We know it's going to come to a screeching halt really, really quickly because I'm not taking Joe Schmo who can bench 45 for 10 and making him into a 305 for 10 bencher in the course of 1 year. Like that's not happening unless I've got like some NFL super responder or something. But in the average fitness world, that's not happening. So I think people are in too big a hurry. And what we really need to get is that, like I said, Kaizen, slight edge, however we want to describe it. If we can just make little bits of progress, a rep here, a rep there, move up a dumbbell size here, move up a kettlebell size there, whatever it is, we can really make a big impact on people.
Well,
But what we want to argue about is reps in reserve and RPE. And, you're like, I look at these guys and think, who are you training? And then people say, oh, I've had no problem teaching all my clients the reps in reserve concept. And I'm just like, really?
well, the other, I
It
mean,
must be a way better.
I don't. If we go back to the nuance here, when you said technical failure, that fully explains your point. And I think your post is totally fine. But I said, okay, cool. That's a really, really neat concept because then as they get better at pushing their technique, then you naturally raise the weight up and they're staying within a good, safe technical range. and then they're fine. I mean, a neat little story you might like. So Donnie Thompson, the first time I ever taught DNS strength training was actually at the compound at his gym, and I was sitting there talking to him about his, breaking the world record or whatever. And he told me, because he did it when I think he was 44, right? And so, gear, whatever, it doesn't matter, but, still a phenomenal feat. And he said that they never changed their 1 rep max unless they did it cleanly. So if squatted 880 or whatever, but, you collapsed to one side, or, you grounded it out and it was just a little shaky and looked a little off, then you kept your PR the same. And you weren't able to change to that PR unless you were able to execute that rep cleanly. So I think that's awesome. And then that's probably why someone not like a spring chicken was able to still lift really, really heavy weight. Again, with or without gear, it doesn't matter. He still is making smart choices by making sure that the technique is clean and not just pushing into, collapsing into horrible, gonna get injured stuff. So the nuance there, 5 to 10 reps under failure is heavy enough. I think that's perfectly good. The other point that I like that you're making is really calling out RPE and RIR. If you've got someone that just walks from the door and has only squatted a couple hundred times, never mind a couple thousands or tens of thousands of times, they're not going to know. So it's kind of your job as a coach to safely push them a little bit more so that they can get the gains that they're kind of looking for, hoping for, right?
Right, exactly. And that's, I just think, I understand, and I think that's, again, part of, we've got these sort of, I want to sell, strength and conditioning nerds, for lack of a better word, who want to show on the internet how smart they are, and they start talking about, well, what about reps in reserve? What about VBT? What about this? I'm like, again, adult fitness. Throw all those concepts out the window. I even said the same thing. Throw percentages out the window. People say, 80%. I can tell you the reverse in terms of, you tell me how many reps you did with that weight, I'll tell you what percentage of your max that is. But I wouldn't tell you what your max was. If you said, okay, dumbbell incline, I'm going to have someone dumbbell incline. I want them to do 80% of their 1RM, for a dumbbell incline today. And I'm like, so what you're telling me is you want them to do a set of 9.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
because if we look at our percentage chart, that's going to be about 9 reps. But no one knows. Like, no one knows their dumbbell incline 1RM. Maybe, again, you might be able to say to me, actually, Mike, I've done the 140s for a single one time. And I'd be like, okay, you actually know. Like, now I could give you numbers. I could look at you and say, okay, I'm going to do 8 times 14 and bang, we're going to be right there. And we're going to be able to go, if you just do the 110s, you're going to get 8 if you could do the 140s for 1, because we can do the mathematical. There are certain very predictable mathematical relationships in strength training that apply, I think, to 90% of the people. Not, maybe even 80. Maybe there's 10% on one end that are going to be able to rep way better than they single, and there's 10% on the other end that are going to be able to single way better than they rep. The other 80% of the people are going to fall, like on those charts. I was doing this, we got this group of 14 kids. I literally predicted every kid. I said, okay, you're going to do this for 5. You're going to do this 5. You're going to do this 5. And they were all like, how do you know? And I said, because I know. Because I know what your best bench press is.
I've watched you lift,
and I know that you're going to be able to do 87.5%. So I just multiplied, and I didn't, my spreadsheet multiplied 0.875 times your bench max, and you're going to be plus or minus 1 rep, guaranteed. And they were all literally, they all were exactly right on, and they all kind of looked at me like, how do you know? And I'm like, I know because it's math, and it's like super predictable, 80-20 math. And that's why I get aggravated with, like, these guys, they make it sound like I'm this, I'm in the corner with a drool cup and a cane. You know what I mean? I'm this doddering old fool who has no idea what he's doing. And I'm thinking, no, I'm 66. I'm coaching. I still coach every day. I coach really good athletes. And I'm in the gym. I am actively there. I'm not playing at home on my computer. I do play at home on my phone in the morning sometimes, but mostly just to aggravate them, not for any other real.
You're quite good
purpose.
at that. You're quite successful at that.
Okay, I'm glad. You got to be good at something.
That's right. No, so I think the percentage thing, I've always kind of had an issue. Now, my coach, he use percentages as guides. Like, hey, by the third set, I want you around 80%, or I want, all your working sets over 75%. But never did Judd prescribe, okay, the first set's going to be 72.5 to 74, and then you're going to go to 75, And the reason for that is, number one, he used tempo a lot. So if you're using tempo, like, okay, we're doing 5 sets of 5, but this one's a 3-0x tempo and that one's a 2-0-2, same time under tension, wildly different, exercises. So you
Right.
can't, the 80% shit doesn't work. On the other side, and you know this as good as anybody, the athlete's going to walk in the door completely different readiness every time they come in. So you might say, okay, if they feel great, then 80% isn't enough for what they're doing. And they might come in and the same 80% is going to kick the shit out of them. So they need to do less. So I've never
Right.
liked
Well, I'm going to give you interesting thought process though, too. You were in what we would classify as the feet and inches sports, right?
proudly.
Very, very different. That's the other thing. When people start talking to me about track and field athletes or about swimmers or about, I'm like, no. These people, individual sport people, are entirely different. When you're coaching, again, the masses, you're a college strength coach. Sometimes, you might walk in and, Rich is my starting left tackle today, and he's not feeling really good today about himself. And I have to take the approach of, something, Rich, I don't give a shit. You need to do 80% for 5 today in the squat because that's what it calls for. And I can't, because one of the things, and that's why it's funny, like people always talk about, you got to fill out questionnaires, you got to talk to the athletes, you got to do this. I'm like, no. I used to say, and this is terrible, I said, sometimes, they say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I used to say, you can lead a horse to water, and sometimes you got to grab the horse's head and shove it in the water. And that's the reality of the situation when you're a college strength coach.
I was just saying, at the
You
college
can't sit
level, you have
around
to,
and be,
we also have to teach them how to do these things.
right. You can't be like warm and fuzzy and say, hey, how do you feel today? But you can do that in track and field because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you are not going to throw as far as you're supposed to throw. Whereas in, whatever, football, basketball, hockey, you know what those guys know? There's guys on my team who don't do anything they're supposed to do, and they're still the best players. And you're always, so you're, I wrote another post one time saying that we fight human nature for a living. That's really what we do in the fitness world, in the strength and conditioning world. We're constantly trying to get people, hey, I need you to push yourself. I need you to not take shortcuts. I need you to be disciplined. I need you to not miss workouts. Feet and inches sports, that's not a problem.
No, because there's a more direct,
it's a very different, environment. And that's where, for me, we've really approached the adult fitness like the team sport world in terms of, we know, these, most of, we talk about this all the time in our staff meetings. We have a lot of clients that I would call check the box clients. What they really want to do is they want to be able to say, I went to Boyle's today and I worked out.
Yep.
Our job is to hopefully make that experience productive where they're consistently getting better. And one of the ways that we hopefully do that, and this is why it's like people say, oh, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, because I'm trying to get them to lift heavier because most of them don't. But I'm also trying to define where is the last presentation I did at Perform Better. One of the things I kept, sort of the tagline that I kept through the whole presentation was safe and smart. So I want you to get better, but I want you to train safe and I want you to train smart. So we've got to figure out where this intersection of safe and smart is that gets people better and doesn't get people hurt. And that was, again, we go back to the CrossFit thing. The failure of CrossFit was the injuries, right? The success of CrossFit was the community.
Yeah.
CrossFit,
well, and it worked. So it worked because if you said, if I was going to say, okay, I want to get in the best shape ever in 3 months, I'm going to send them to CrossFit. But if I said I want to get the best shape ever in 3 years, it's not going to work. Like, they're going to either get injured, and I still do CrossFit. I'm a pro CrossFit person, but they plateau. They're overworking their bodies for the most part. Some of them gotten a little smarter, but it works in the short term. In the long term, what's the longest client? You and I were talking about this a couple of years ago. You have clients you trained for 15 years.
I have one that literally just retired, quote unquote, and it was 30 years.
Right. So keeping someone an arc of 30 years, it has to be fulfilling and entertaining, and you can't fuck them up. So
Yeah.
if you're in there, and this is what I want to get to next, the 1 to 5 rep range, if you have that person that when I mean at 30 years, they're completely different people at the end of that 30-year arc there. So let's move on to the next set. So just to kind of recapitulate the first one, 5 to 10 reps done to failure is heavy enough. You want them to go to technical failure instead of like absolute mechanical failure because, or physiological failure, whatever you want to call it, because you need to push them farther than they think because they don't know what their barrier is. And by having the line a technical barrier or a technical failure, you're able to push them harder than they were before, that they've worked before, but in a way that is, like you said, safe and smart. Is that what the first line
Yeah,
is?
exactly. And because I think what you do is you don't overwhelm the stabilizers, because when things start to deteriorate, what's deteriorating generally are the stabilizers, the little muscles. If you think about even goblet squatting, whatever it is, if somebody starts getting sloppy, what's going? It's usually not their legs. Their legs aren't done, right? Their torso is probably done. Their low back muscles, their upper back muscles. So in any of those situations, yes, technical failure when you're like, okay, we can't do any more good reps. We're done. We're moving on. So yes.
Yeah, that's great. So now let's talk about the 5 to 10 reps versus the 1 to 5 reps. Because where I'll push back on you maybe is if you're going to go to technical failure, and let's say that they're doing a triple, we'll just put it right in the middle. What's the problem with going to technical failure in a triple versus a set of 8?
Well, I guess the biggest difference for me is the technical failure in a triple is going to be more costly because the load is going to be higher, right? If somebody, when they fail, they're going to fail with a larger load. And really, like, let's say it's a triple. If they fail in a triple, then they did a double. If they did a double, they had 92 to 95% of their
Well, they did a real,
one
they did a
repetition.
real, that's a real double. That's not like a,
if they did a real, again, and that's what I mean with, again, we're talking about adult fitness. Like if you're trying to hit those numbers, the problem with them is it's no problem if you undershoot. It's a major problem if you overshoot. That's the difference. So I just look at it and think, like, for us, and I got the semantics guys got me too, because it should really be 1 to 4, because the guy said you can't have both ranges. He said you can't say 5 to 10 and 1 to 5.
oh, fuck off.
I was like, okay, you're right.
As if there's, as if there's, well, the other one, as if there's there's this absolute line right at, 6 to 8 or 1 to 4. Yeah. All right, whatever. I'm not even going to argue over that because that's just a silly semantical.
But people, trust me, people did. But so the point,
because 5's okay, Mike. 4, totally different scenario.
Right, exactly. And that's the difference. Like you could look at it and say 5 but not 4, 4 but not 3, 3 but not 2, right?
No.
At some point you just have, what we did at some point you just have to draw the line.
Yeah, I think you corrected later. I said 1 to 4. Yeah, you said 1 to 4, whatever.
Yeah, and what we do even now, like with our kids, we do some 4s. We occasionally do some 3s.
Well, that's the thing
with
that,
our
like,
athletes.
What you're great
singles, we'll do. I have no problem with people, like, especially like, someone wants to do 1 rep back bench. Go ahead. You're a young, healthy person. Knock yourself out. Have fun.
Yeah,
I'm not against.
It's what
that,
are you doing
but
consistently?
Again, right, and we're going back to the idea adult fitness.
Yeah, the word adult there is qualified as rather important for the entire post. So, but let's try to steelman this here. So you're saying 1 to 4 reps. I'll change it to 4, so we're not having any sort of inconsistencies there. Would you say that it's accurate that when you get to technical failure with a double, you're closer to mechanical failure there than you would have been if you were at an 8, or at least?
And I just think if again, and you will know this yourself, again, experienced lifter. I always said the bad stuff that happens in the weight room usually happens at 1, 2, and 3. If you're going to see something go to shit, it's probably not going to be the 10th rep of a 10 rep set. It's probably going to be, when somebody's really got that heavy weight on the bar, 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 reps. That's to me where suddenly spotters become more important. There's a lot of things that become more important when the loads get heavier that, again, in the adult fitness world probably makes for a little bit higher degree of difficulty. Even again, like for you, teaching people how do you bail? How do you drop the bar? What do you do? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff there that you just look at and think does it have a place in adult fitness? And
Mechanical
I look at it,
mechanical failure has no place in adult fitness, in my opinion.
right,
None.
exactly. So that's my point, is that if I keep you at 5 to 10, I'm probably keeping you out of that range pretty safely, in terms of, if you miss your set of 5 and you got a set of 4, I'm thinking, what, even if it was heavy dumbbells, whatever it is, you're going to get out of that. You're going to extricate yourself from that situation pretty well. But all of the problems that I've seen, every quote unquote accident or things that went wrong in the weight room, were almost all singles.
Well,
Truthfully,
it's funny because I actually am on the medical side. So I'm the guy that you would send somebody to. And I was thinking, like, when
right.
you said that, all right, can I think of one time where someone hurt their back, let's say, doing a squat, or they hurt their shoulder, anything over 3 reps? And the answer is no. I cannot think of a scenario. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been treating injuries for 15 years. It's still my full-time gig. I cannot think of a time where somebody came in and I tweaked my back. I mean, I had somebody come in this week that hurt their back deadlifting. It was a single. So like
Right.
and I don't ever think like, oh yeah, I'm like, I guess maybe I could put in the CrossFit world, because then they're like their 5th round, they're doing 225 for 5 reps, and and a 400-meter run or something like that. But for the pure strength training part, I totally agree with you. So
Right. And so think about this for you listeners out there. You're talking about, okay, someone like you, 15 years as a medical professional, someone like me, 44 years coaching. I've never seen anybody get hurt in the weight room. Honestly, I can tell you, singles. I would tell you 99% of the things that I saw go wrong, whether it was backs, whether it was shoulders. I had a kid one time break his wrist on a 1 rep max front squat. The only time I've ever seen it.
yeah, I
Like,
had a girl, an Olympic
just
weightlifter.
slipped down, and all of a sudden this guy ditches the bar and he goes walking out, like holding on to his wrist. And my thing is that, and it's funny. I'm doing a presentation for Parker Seminars in February, and one of the slides is, have you ever hurt yourself? Have you ever hurt somebody else? Because I want everybody to think about that. Because if you haven't done it yet, particularly if you haven't hurt someone else,
Someone else
hurt
is
yourself.
much
Like I
more
hurt myself
impactful, is much more
innumerable
impactful.
times. Right. But when you hurt someone else, when you realize my choice got Rich hurt, like I told Rich what weight to put on the bar and to attempt it, and now he's hurt.
I have an athlete
really
in my head right now. She was a sprinter that I worked with at Emporia State. I just, I pushed her, and I was excited, and I'm trying to push her, and I didn't realize that I was pushing someone that was already over pushing themselves. So it was not the scenario that we talked about earlier, where they don't know what their top end is, and they're saying that 3 reps is all they can get. They can get double that. This girl was throttling herself, and I was like, oh, let's push her harder, and she tweaked her back, and she was able to come back from it. But still, like, that was terrifying for me, because I can't make them better. Like, oh, okay, cool, I just fucked this person's back up. They have to sit out for a little while, and they would not have done that had I not, been there to kind of like work on a little bit. So, yeah.
And that's what I mean. So I think that's the stuff you have to think about when we talk about risk versus reward. And I always think when we talk about we talk about adult clients, people say, what's an adult? I'm like, an adult has a job.
Adult does not get paid to do the things that they're doing.
Right. And they get paid to do something else. And if they get hurt, it's really funny, because Kevin Carr, that is one of my partners now, who's one of the greatest guys in the world.
A great Boston good dude. Yeah.
And one of the other guys that works with this guy, Steve Bunker. Steve's a great guy, but Steve's like me. He's 66, but he's absolutely made of like
titanium
rebar.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, can't get hurt, right? Is still messing around with the power lifts, at 66 years old, whatever. But years ago, probably when he was in his 50s, he talked to Kevin. He kept saying to Kevin, oh, you should power lift me. You should power lift me. Kevin kind of starts sneaking some lifts in on the side with Steve. And Kevin goes to a meet with Steve, and Kevin blows his back out. Now, Kevin's working for us as a trainer, and he spends 2 days in his apartment, walk on his hands and knees. Like, he can't get up. He can't stand upright. He can't. And it was really funny. He came in after that, and he's like, I converted that day on my floor. I realized.
Yeah, before he was just, my mentor is
people
telling me that we need to be doing this. And then now it became very real to him. Oh, this is why we need to do it this way.
This is why. And this is why people always say, and I can say this, I always go, it's I used to think Mike Boyle was a pussy club. There's all these guys who used to badmouth me. And what Joe DeFranco, I remember Joe DeFranco on his podcast one time literally said that. I used to think Mike Boyle was such a pussy, always talking about, worrying about people getting hurt and always talking about risk reward. He said, now I'm X number of years old, with a bad back and I have to train around my injuries. And suddenly I realize, wow, I understand why he was saying the things that he was saying. And there's a lot of those guys. The problem with them is that they had to get old.
Yeah, but I mean,
And my thing is,
go ahead.
I've watched it over time, and now I'm thinking, hey, you know something? I'm going to try to preempt some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to try to help you make better. Cause I mean, I can remember, I'm talking about, I was lifting with Rob Lasorsa back in, literally when I say back in the 70s,
Thrower,
we were
shot putter,
lifting in
just
the
saying.
1979 with Mike Wojcik and Rob Lasorsa and these guys, and, in the basement of Springfield College. And we just thought it was normal. Like squat workout, deadlift workout, sore for 4 or 5 days, like sore back, things hurt, shoulders hurt, ice, Advil. Like that was just, it was all part of the process of getting strong. And now I look at it and think, wow, if I can help somebody navigate that process minus those things.
I mean, for me, there was 9 steps. There was 9 steps outside of the gym in Ashland. And me, B- talent, A+ ability to grind. If I could walk down those steps without holding onto the railing, I didn't think I pushed hard enough. Like, if I can walk down the steps and I'm not holding onto the railing, then I left some in the tank, and that's no good. And, and the other one, my back. So I have 3 1 centimeter disc herniations in my back. I thought my back soreness afterwards was delayed onset muscle soreness. Nope. It was my back slowly crying, and manifesting it as a back tightness. But this is a good thing to talk about too, though, because you're really good with you want to push them a little bit more, but if you get them injured, and this is going back to Kevin, in the DNS strength training classes, we talk about injury to or damage to passive tissues, a disc. When you herniate a disc, you've overstretched and or torn the annular fibers. And the passive tissues of the body do not heal at all like the active tissues. So your muscles, if you a little bit of a pull in the muscle belly, it's got a good blood supply and it can adapt. Anytime that you damage a passive tissue, it results in permanent compromise to that tissue's ability to perform. So that disc will never be the same ever again. And if you, with your idea to stick to that 5 to 10 rep range, pushing them to technical failure, so they're at least getting into a therapeutic dose, but you're doing this slowly and repetitively over time, then you're never putting them in a scenario where they're going to damage passive tissues. And so then when they get into the end of their career, let's just talk about performance. Let's not even talk about like, oh, I'm trying to make them feel good when they're 60. It's, I want them to be doing well at the back half of their career. If they go into the back half of their career with less damage to passive tissues, their physical capabilities are going to be better than they would have if you were going full throttle the whole time, hitting your, 1-3 rep things.
Exactly. Well, it's funny. I wrote an article one time called Training an Athlete for 17 Years. And it was basically about this guy, Jay Pandolfo, who's now the hockey coach at BU, but played I think he played 13 years in the NHL and 4 years at BU. So I trained him for 17 years. One of the things that I said is everybody should have to train somebody as you talk through the arc of their career. Because Jay was one of these guys, like he could bench 300 pounds as a freshman, right? One of the strongest freshmen we ever had walk into place, and was a great college player, was a great professional player. But by the end of his career, it was one leg squat, dumbbell bench, plyos, no cleans, no back squats, no bench press. Like we're not doing any of the conventional barbell exercises that were his steady diet in years 1 through 4. And it was almost like literally like, kind of like meal planning, right? Like, oh, we're going to take this out. Oh, that doesn't work anymore. We're going to take this out.
Yeah, you're sensitive. You're sensitive to almonds. We're going to take those out. Oh, we got to watch with the gluten.
Yep.
You
exactly.
can't.
That's how it was.
Carbs aren't working anymore.
A couple incidents of back pain. Okay. You're not tolerating back squat anymore. You're not tolerating front squat anymore. But as I started to do this, I just started to look at this and think, why am I not being more preemptive, more surgical about this with everybody. And then when I get, like I said, our adults, and I've said this before and I've gotten in trouble, our adults don't touch a barbell, period.
No,
Nobody touches the straight bar is in the landmine. If they're doing like landmine press,
unilateral. Yep. Yeah, I
they
mean,
have one hand on a bar, but we don't barbell bench press, we don't barbell squat, we don't barbell deadlift, we don't Olympic lift. And if someone came in and watched, I didn't even think about it until somebody asked me, and then I thought, wow, in our adult program, we don't have any barbell exercises.
Yeah, but that's brilliant. So in the strength training classes, we break them down in mechanics, we call it degrees of freedom. And if you have a barbell, right, we call that a constrained symmetrical movement. So it's you're constrained, you're holding the same object, so your degrees of freedom are limited there, and your stance is going to be symmetrical for the most part. That is the most load in the sagittal plane in the back. And if you just take your hands off of the same object and now you've got two, you've opened up the degrees of freedom. So now it's an unconstrained movement. Or if you're doing a unilateral movement, it's even better. So now, because of the asymmetry that's built into the system, number one, you have to use your stabilizers more. So you're not going to overload any tissue. And number two, the actual load going through the system is reduced. So the risk of a catastrophic injury goes down dramatically. So just by flipping over to, all right, man, we're just doing dumbbells. We're going to do more asymmetrical stances. We're going to do more unilateral loads. You now can train the body. You can push them. You can push them really, really hard, but they're less likely to get hurt for those two reasons.
Right. Exactly. And that is exactly what we do. And probably, honestly, much more probably empirically driven than what you're doing. Like you're doing it from a science-driven standpoint. We did it just from the standpoint of realizing, okay, this works better.
Yeah.
This makes more sense. Because I argue this, like people, the 2 years where we were with the Red Sox, nobody did a barbell bench press.
I mean, there's just almost no scenario where a baseball player should be doing a barbell bench press, in my opinion.
None, but not one guy ever asked. But we had guys, our pitchers routinely could grab the hundreds. Any one of the pitchers could probably grab the hundreds and bang out a set of 8 dumbbell bench presses with the hundreds. They were strong. They were not weak people. But you talk about, I used to say to people, well, they know the dumbbells because, again, you talk about the degree of freedom idea. A guy that knows his shoulder, like I would watch our guys, every single one of them, dumbbell bench press different. I should have actually videoed every single guy so that I would then have had that to show later on.
Yeah, they're natural. They're pain-free strength slot. They're
exactly. Like they know, like my cuff feels great here. Some guys were literally almost close gripping. Some guys were like conventional, looked like they had a bar.
Yep.
Other guys were 45. Some guys turned them. I never taught one guy how to do that lift in the pitching staff. I looked and thought, how they do it? Yep, they do it the way that they know works best for their shoulder. And when I start saying, oh, you should do this, I'm out of my league, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage of doing unilateral or asymmetrical stuff or unconstrained. So unconstrained would be like 2 dumbbells doing a dumbbell bench press. That's going to be an unconstrained movement right there. That allows them the degrees of freedom to find the slots and the positions that feel stronger and better for them. The only argument against that kind of training, and I don't think it applies to the population that we're mainly focusing on one bit, is it reduces the actual neural drive. So if you care, like when I was an Olympic weightlifter and a thrower, I might have cared. I don't think it actually matters as much as we like. This is a very nuanced sort of esoteric discussion. I don't think it actually mattered, but in my head, I wanted to be moving more motor or recruiting more motor units in there so that my central nervous system would have a higher stimulus and yada, yada, yada. That's the only thing, because the more degrees of freedom you have, the compromise is in force output. Like you just can't, if I go into single leg, single arm pressing, that's like the most possible, or a staggered stance, we'll say that. You just can't move nearly as much weight as you can holding a barbell, laying on your back, a constrained pressing motion. But the problem with the bilateral constrained thing is now the load is higher. So if that's what you want for neural drive, I guess you could make that argument. But now the load going through the actual tissue is greater. and you can't move into the positions that your body wants subconsciously to put them into to stay safe. So that's, I mean,
I tell people all the time, the bar is a literal restrictor.
yeah.
It is going to, like, you can't bend it. They always say, oh, you want to think about bending the bar. You can think about it all you want. You ain't going to do it. And so it is literally, that's why I always say to people, one of the reasons we don't use bars is it takes away degrees of freedom. The other thing, and this, you may have thought about this or may not, one of the reasons I like trap bars better than Olympic bars is because they're shorter, because it's a smaller torque producer. When you think about, trap bar, if you start to rotate in a conventional deadlift with a 7-foot bar, you've got a larger torque converter than you would have if you started to rotate with your trap bar.
Oh, the
You get a little,
the inertia, because it's farther
you get
out.
a little out of sync with the trap bar at 5 foot. You may not, again, damage you. You talked about those kind of whatever inert, whatever you call the tissues. You know what I mean? Those tissues are going to get damaged. One of the things that's going to get them, I always say, the things that get them: torque, shear, or compression. Right? That's what's going to get those tissues. When you look at a trap bar, you get less shear because you're standing inside the bar, and you get less torque because the bar is
well, and
shorter.
you have more degrees of freedom with a trap bar.
Right, and you have more degrees of freedom. And that's why when I get like these guys, this is why I get so animated, aggravated, or whatever, because I think the people that are arguing with me couldn't even have this conversation with you. Right? Because they haven't even thought about, all they want to do is regurgitate, and again, I love Jim Wendler, to be honest. I think Jim Wendler is freaking brilliant. Watch his YouTube videos on training high school kids. It's amazing stuff. But guys want to regurgitate Wendler's 531, or they want to, so that means 531 is no good. And I'm like, no, that means you didn't read 531. Because if you read 531, you would know that what Wendler said was a set of 5, and then a submaximal set of 3, basically another warm up. Then put a weight on the bar and do as many reps as you can with that weight. That's what he meant. His one set was not 1. It was like 1 plus. And in the beginning, he expected it to be significantly more than 1. And he had you starting at 20% less than your max. Like, there's all this stuff. I'm like, if you're going to quote Wendler 531 to me, then indicate to me that you read the freaking thing, right? Because you didn't read it. You think you know. And there's so many of these I think I know guys out there spouting. And my problem, I can't resist. Like I said, there are some times where I think you should just, people say, oh, don't engage with them. And I'm just like, they need to be engaged with.
Well, someone needs to be sort of, because I thought about this. So you did this way before I did, but and somewhere, I don't know, in the early 2000s, I finally, I was like admitting to myself, like, okay, kind of like, admitting that you're an alcoholic or something like that. You know what? I don't think I should be squatting, but heavy back squatting. I just don't think, and for me, someone that loves back squatting, there was 0 days that I would go to the gym, no matter how hard the workout was going to be, and I knew it, no matter how much pain I was going to be in, I wanted to squat. And there was this, I don't know, social pressure because lifting heavy shit is cool. You've got all kinds of squat programs out there, and that's how I got strong. And so when I did this presentation for Perform Better years ago, I had to think about, like, well, why is that? And it's like, well, the whole industry does it, so everyone is doing it. So of course there's a little bit of pressure there. A lot of times that's how you were taught. So meaning, like, my coach, he taught me to get strong by squatting. Okay, so going against that is a little bit counterintuitive. Then I got up to, someone gets up to whatever level they get up to doing that thing. So to go back on all that and say, all right, well, I got strong by doing this. My coach taught me to do it this way. Everybody else does it this way, but I think I'm going to go to lunging or unilateral stuff, is very counterintuitive. Now, you've been doing it long enough, and you have the most naturally pragmatic brain in the strength training industry, to you just like, look, that shit doesn't work. They keep getting hurt. I've done this 40 times. I'm not going to do it 41 times. I'm now just going to actually change what I'm doing, so I'm screwing up less athletes. I don't think it comes at a detriment to their performance at all, not even a little bit. And so I know before I got it, you had like gotten rid of squatting a long time ago.
Yeah. And our results show that it doesn't have any detriment to their performance. That's the one thing I look at and think, we've still got all these world-class athletes. We've still got all of these people doing really well. You know, we're not like, if I thought, and because this is the part again that, and these are the sort of, you know, the internet accusations. If I actually was not thinking to the degree that people think that I'm not, I mean, I think about this all the time. I would have gone back to squatting if I thought, you know something, we are really missing something here by not squatting. I might have said, you know something, we've got to revisit this. I've never revisited it. And I didn't revisit it because, and again, I've told these stories over and over again. We did, when we first started playing with the, you know, the rear foot elevated split squat. At that point, we were doing barbell, rear foot elevated split squat, Bulgarians, you know, whatever people want to call them. But I was curious, right? And so we tested back squat, front squat, split squat. Every single guy on my team at that time, Boston University, I think we won the national championship that year. So it was a good, you know, it was a highly talented team, probably 8 or 9 guys on that team, played in the NHL. Every guy could split squat what he could front squat, every single one. And it was like, I started looking at that and saying, like, wait a second.
Feet flat or the back foot elevated?
Back foot elevated.
So
back foot elevated. You know, and then it was a rep max projection, so people could, you know, you could again nitpick it to death.
No, I don't want to nitpick it. I like the correlation. I'll get into my correlation in a second. So you're saying,
we had guys do 225 for 10, you know, rear foot elevated split squat.
Hold on.
Back
bar in the back.
Barbell, yeah, so bar in the back, 225.
Your rear foot elevated, bar in the back, matched your front squat.
My front squat, match the front squat.
That's a cool,
right across the board.
That's a cool correlation.
100%. And, you know, the bad part is when I moved out of that office, I should have hung on to all that data, but it was, I mean, when I'm telling you that it was guy for guy right across the board, it wasn't like, oh, this guy's a little bit off, this guy's a little bit off. The numbers were almost identical. And I started looking at this and saying, wait a second, you know, if I can do this unilateral exercise and it's giving me the same
stimulus,
whatever loading that I'm getting off of my symmetrical bilateral exercise. And then, because I always said to people, and then, you know, you go down, like you said, the neurological route, the functional route, whatever, however you want to describe that route, you start looking and thinking, I'm getting significantly more benefit here. Because now I've got way more, right? I've got glute medius, I've got opposite side QL, I've got adductor, like I've got all these things that are in play now that weren't in play in my bilateral exercise, right? I've probably got really, really high neural drive, at least in that leg, if we're looking at where the loading is.
Yes.
If you can, again, look at this and say, you know, say that neural drive is going to be isolated to the working muscles.
Well,
right?
Think of it as tissue. You could think of it as tissue tension. You have, so for me, I did a whole, and I continue to bark this. I did the, you know, basically step back lunges. So they're stepping back. So it's not rear foot elevated. And I did a lecture here in Columbus, and it was like 120 athletes. I said, okay, all these gyms that came to this lecture, they went and they did like a squat program. They tested it, and then they just split. Like, okay, if you were doing front squats at this percentage, you know, whatever, you're just going to do, you know, you're going to do front rack step back lunges, and just, you know, cup for cup, replace them like that. Okay. And they went through, and again, I think I screwed that up. The percentages were obviously going to be slightly different. And they just went through and they just did the cup for cup. They're doing front squats, they're doing front rack, step back lunges, they're doing back squats, they're doing back rack lunges. And they kind of worked up to it. And I'll give you the percentages here in a second. But at the end of the program, a lot of interesting things. Number one, tons of PRs, right? But the ones that I thought were the most interesting is the athletes said that they were less achy in the morning. Their warm-up time took less. And then for the Olympic weightlifters that did this, they could push into the platform harder. I thought that was really interesting. And so what I found was that I think front foot elevated is the better one because it's slightly below parallel. But on flat ground, you should be able to move 70% of your relative max, which is why I was kind of fascinated with your front squat one. So if you're doing a back rack, you know, lunge, you should be able to move 70%. So if you're doing your 5 rep max or whatever, 5 reps each leg, alternating step back lunges, you should be no less than 70%. And I try to get athletes over 80%. So if you just do the math on that, there's actually more tissue tension, more force going through that front leg in that lunge than it would be in a squat.
Right. And way more. Like you look at, I always say, that's why I always show everybody, Alex Natera's research shows you it's way more. Like he did force plate. And he, again, people can pick that apart. He did force plates, single leg, whatever, Smith machine. But all the numbers, everything that you look at tells us this. But the problem is, again, we have a group, I hate to say it, we have a group of non-thinkers in our field. And they're just parrots. Again, it's one of my favorite slides, right? I have a parrot and an owl. Like, who do you want to be, right? Do you want to be the wise old owl, or do you want to be the parrot? Do you want to be the guy who's thinking, or do you want to be the guy who's just repeating? The guys I get on the internet are the parrots, and they're all parroting. They're all the guys, well, barbell medicine said this about you, and I'm like, I get it. I can't think of his name. Feigenbaum, actually, but Dr. Feigenbaum said this, and I'm like, whatever. It makes no difference what he said. Because he said it doesn't make any of it factual. It just means I'm expressing an opinion, he's expressing an opinion,
And he's allowed to have that.
And my thing is, we're all allowed to have them, and then you choose. One of the things I've done really well in this field is I've figured out whose opinions I valued. I figured out who's smarter than me, and I listened to those people, whether it was Gary Gray at one point or Stuart McGill at one point or whoever it was. Every time I went somewhere and thought this person knows more about a topic, maybe not the topic, but a topic than I do, I just shut my mouth and listened. And I think that's what a lot more of these people should shut their mouth and listen. And sometimes I don't even get, like, I would like to get a lot ruder. One guy said, let me know today. It was like, let me know when you write another book. And I literally posted back, well, third edition of Functional Training for Sports is coming out in 2026, because it actually is coming out. But then I wanted to be like, let me know when your book comes out.
Right.
And it's probably going to be the Dick and Jane version of strength and conditioning. You know what I mean? Like, see Joe squat, see Joe deadlift. It's like, come on. Most of these guys have not, they've offered nothing productive to the profession except for their internet presence. Yeah. And I would be like, okay, show me, send me, direct me to your YouTube lecture where you talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? I mean, I think some of that, unfortunately, is just social media. If they're trying to get likes, that's an alternate motive. Another one is, and this is why I wanted to hop on an actual conversation with you and have a nuanced conversation. You can't really do that on social media. So, like, if we go through here, okay, you're talking about technical failure, great, and then you say, oh, the risk of 1 to 4 reps is not worth the reward. Okay, well, that's because you believe that if you're going to fail, because you need to push them a little bit farther, if you're going to fail, the likelihood that they have a bad injury with, a 95% on the bar is much, much greater. So the risk is higher. So I don't think there's any statement on here that someone, if they actually listen to what you were saying, the logic behind your statement is going to say like, oh, that's BS, right? Because, I didn't like the failure part. That I pushed back at there. Okay, well, then you're talking about technical failure. Okay, cool, totally get it. And then the 1 to 5 rep range, when we sort of talked through that, it's like, oh, okay, you're just saying that the actual likelihood there's a catastrophic event with 1 to 3 reps is a lot higher than there is if you're doing 5 to 10 reps. Totally agree with you. The last one we can kind of like talk about, finish on this, is just the adults scenario. I don't think this is the least controversial of all of them. With the adults, they're there to get in better shape or to, not regress in fitness as quickly, depending on where they're at in their fitness journey. They're not there to push themselves to the next level at the risk of getting injured. So I think the previous 2 claims, especially if it's qualified with for adults, are perfectly justified.
Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously, I said it, so I agree. But yeah, but it's like when you think about it, you would like to exercise, you would like to feel better. You would, I think ideally like to look better. I think there's a lot. I think again, the look better thing is probably more the influences projecting that than it is the person. I would say if we've got 400 clients and I said to people, you okay, check off one box. Which would you rather? Feel better, look better. I'm going to tell you 350 people out of 400 are going to check feel better. There might be 50 that check look better, but 350 are going to check feel better. And then if you think, and what are you trying to do? Like for me, as we're trying now to avoid, you had made a really good analogy, the arc, right? The curve, kind of the bell curve, because it's great when you're on this side of the arc.
Yeah.
As a guy who's firmly on this side of the arc, it's very, very different. There was a guy, I watched a YouTube thing the other day, he was critiquing Peter Attia and I's conversation and saying that, these two guys, and it's the whole thing, they're fear mongers, they're encouraging frailty, and I'm kind of like, you're 30, you're making this video. Like, I just would like for you to make this video when you were 60, because you might realize that, all the things that you were scared of were real. Like, yeah, there were real monsters under the bed in terms of like back pain and knee pain and shoulder pain and neck pain.
A lot of times there's that. They just haven't gone through, they haven't, the arc of their career, to stick with that term. They just haven't gone through, they haven't seen it. Fine. But the other one is, I think a lot of people on social media, and we definitely need to go on this rebel, they're doing bad faith arguments. So like, I watched that entire little roundtable that you did with Peter. I thought was great. I was actually surprised that Peter just gave up deadlifts. It's a different story. But what you were saying with the analogy, they were saying like, oh, like slamming your hand, or that's, and you're like, no, you're like, you were making the point. No, I'm just saying, if they keep getting injured, why are we doing this? You weren't.
Why are you doing it? I use it absurd. Like, okay, I'll give you an absurd injury. You slammed your hand in the car door.
Yep. Right? And they were like, it's not the same as this. Like, you need, and it's like, all right, that's not what I was saying. Like, but that, again, that's a bad faith argument. They're not actually trying to understand what you're coming from. You were saying, if you keep getting hurt doing 1 to 4 reps, then why do we keep doing this? Like, what is the reward? And with the adult population, I don't even know what the reward would be, because I've got 2 things I kind of want to finish on. One of them has to do with like, all right, if we switch over and we take out the adults, do you agree with either of those statements for athletes? And what are those situations? Like, would you say that for most athletes, they don't need to do 1 to 4 reps? Or would you, like, I might tease it out, depends on what are the requirements for the sport. So as a thrower, I need to be doing higher rep stuff. I don't think I need to be.
I'd say, I don't think we want to live in that 1 to 4 rep range, but I think we want to visit. So we're going to go there.
Athletes.
We're probably going to go there 3 weeks. Maybe, out of 12, we might go there 6 weeks. And I would have no problem with that. I have no problem with people, young people, like you talked about, again, tissue, good blood supply, good stabilizers. I'm not nearly as fearful of what's going to happen to my 18, 19, 20-year-old as I am what's going to happen to my 40, 50, 60-year-old, because I just think the system is different. So I would say, no, we definitely, because if you looked at our programs, if you came in, you would see 1s, 2s, and 3s. And we do a lot of 3s now in our unilateral stuff, because I think it's really hard to hurt yourself in a unilateral exercise. I think it's hard to load a unilateral exercise heavy enough where you can produce that structural issue that you could get in a bilateral. Like if you said to me, bilateral back squat, bilateral deadlift, we're going to do a steady diet of triples, I'd be like, I don't know. If you said to me, 1 leg squat, gator squat, split squat, whatever, we're going to do a steady diet of triples, I'd be like, fine, knock yourself out. I don't think anything bad could happen.
Well,
I think you'd fail at the lift, probably before you'd fail at the stabilizer.
Yeah, I mean that.
Whereas in the bilateral stuff, I think, like, if you, again, I always say to people, I've been to enough powerlifting meets. I competed as a powerlifter in the 80s with my man Rob again, and we would go. And I always say to people, go watch squats, and I will guarantee you, if you go watch a whole powerlifting meet in squats, and every failed lift will be a failed back, not failed legs. You will see, somebody's ass will get up and the bar will get forward.
Yep.
But you will almost never see like that.
They hold good form and then they just sink back down.
That Olympic lifter, that perfect, beautiful high bar back squat, and that guy's just driving, and all of a sudden he's like, "Ooh, my legs can't do it," and he ends up going through
lowering it down, setting the right. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Right. The bar gets dumped forward. It's just the way that it is. It's really rare. Again, it's rare to see guys dump a bar backwards, right? Deadlift, same thing. If you look, you watch. We didn't deadlift for a long time because my thing was, I don't think anybody can deadlift heavy and deadlift well, because I'd go to meets and any deadlift, any max that you saw, you were like, oh God, you know what I mean? It was cringy. You know, you'd see guys, they'd be round and they'd be like, you know, chugging it up there, and you just think like, oh, you got it. Like he's gonna get 3 whites because he's there.
Yeah, I
But you know,
mean
if you gave him
the
like a
deadlift.
poetic score,
Yeah, I mean the deadlift is the one just in my entire career that's the exercise that causes the most low back injuries that I see coming in the door. They're not even close. I mean,
and then we went to trap bar, and again, technical failure. Like I just boom, like you round, you're done. See if that's end of story. We have no problems, but we have no problems. And again, that's because we coach it better. We got smarter. We realized that okay, the goal is not A to B.
well, I
The
like the
goal
I
is pretty
we've talked
pretty A to B. Like I want A to B, but if it's not pretty, not done. And
more
like you said,
more
then it
mo-
goes back to
more A's until you're ready to go to B.
right. It's where you talk about like the Donnie Thompson thing, right? Like I'm looking at it thinking that wasn't your max. You know, that was an ugly round back, you know, ballsy, hey, I love you, good job, kind of, but no, we're not, you know, we're not putting that on the sheet. I'm not basing your next workout off that
Yeah.
because I don't want a repeat of that. And that's kind of where we are. So, you know, but again, but we barbell bench press, we barbell hang clean, we trap bar deadlift. We're very, very different in our athlete world than we are in our adult world. And that's again, like in the, you know, the Atia podcast, that's what I was trying to get across to those guys is that what we get again is this influencer trickle down into fitness. And it's like, no, that stuff was never supposed to trickle down to fitness.
Yeah.
It's not where you want to be. It's not what you want to be doing. And it's, you know, again, it's the starting strength guys. Like there's some groups out there that perpetuate that because it's good for them. And that's where, like I said, the barbell medicine guys, like they want you. And it's kind of interesting because again, it would be like you, like saying, I'm going to be a really strong proponent of, I think everybody should back squat and barbell deadlift. Because damn, I really want to move back to New England and get that house in the water. And if you know, if I can get everybody to screw up their back, I'm you know, my place, you know, I'll be freaking rocking them through, you know, in one door and out the other, and
Yeah, well, we're the
bringing the
opposite.
cash.
You're gonna love this, Mike. So on February 21st, we're doing like a cheap 5-hour workshop for coaches in the area, and it's how to manage clients with low back pain. And we will be preaching Mike Boyle shit the entire time. And so we're going to try to literally teach all the trainers in the area and the coaches how to, you know, not fuck up their clients' backs. And if they do, how do they manage it? As opposed to heavy deadlifts are really good to strengthen the posterior annular fibers of the discs, and the discs will adapt, and we're supposed to be in flexion, and lots of Jefferson curls and lots of
Yeah,
wave loading in the back squat.
exactly.
And by the way,
So
here's my card, you know, so
yeah, and last point, I actually have to finish up too, but it's the same thing when you listen to Miguel talking about the same thing in terms of, you know, not a deadlift fan, right? And you just look and think, and you know, then people were all over him on when he did the Atia podcast, and I'm kind of like, maybe you should just listen. And again, agree, disagree, like his methods, not like his methods. He spent a lot of time with back pain patients. If you talk to people who spent a lot of time with back pain patients, and they all don't like deadlifts, you know, straight bar or whatever, that should probably tell you something. Hey, all of these medical professionals, and they're all like, you know, not my favorite lift, you know, and that's why even like, because like Ripto hates the trap bar.
I hate the
I'm like,
trap bar. I love the idea behind it, but to me, yeah, I mean, I prefer a barbell, but that's me personally. I think for clients, I think the trap bar is great. I also do a lot of kettlebell stuff, and you can essentially do the same motion with a heavy kettlebell. But the problem is, you know, no one wants to have kettlebells up to 205, multiple sets of those.
Exactly. That's what our deadlift rule is. You know, you don't, well, with our adults, once you can deadlift the heaviest, you know, sumo deadlift the heaviest kettlebell,
There's your max.
you're on to all unilateral stuff. See ya. You know, with our athletes, once you can deadlift the heaviest kettlebell, then you get to go to the trap bar
Yeah,
because
that's really
you
cool.
know, and it's like this kettlebell sumo deadlift is the simplest
That
possible max strength exercise you can do, I think. In
And it's
terms of
also an
okay,
exercise that you can take one step to the right, and now you're doing a good squat pattern. It's really close to a goblet squat, and you take one step
right.
to the left, and you're really doing a really good hinge pattern. So it's an
Yeah, I
amazing.
tell everybody that. I say we talk about the fact we say Goblet squat is the regression. If you get someone who can't kettlebell deadlift, have them bring it up to goblet position, have them goblet squat, and they'll be better, and they are.
Yeah, it's
So,
awesome.
what was the last one? Because I actually
One last one, I'll
I
get
didn't
you
know
out of here.
we were going to do a short podcast, you and me, and instead we talked for
Did
an
you
hour and a half.
really think that you and I were gonna have a short podcast? But
You know, I initially you said, yeah, we'll just record a short one, but I should have known. I should have known we weren't capable of that.
I mean, and
Not that I have,
I knew that you were
not
going
that
to
I've
think
not
that, so
thoroughly.
I told you short, knowing it was going to be long, just so I could get you on here and chat a little bit. Yeah, last little thing. So this is something I never did when I was an athlete, but I want to know what your thoughts are on it. When I was an athlete, we did a lot of sort of like max effort method. So we would come in and we would say, okay, you're going to do 5 sets, work up to a heavy set, work up to a max set or whatever. And Judd would sometimes give a rep range. What I've been doing now for the last probably decade that's worked out great is I will basically find some sort of a close maxi-ish thing. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again. And then I will do a set range instead of a rep range. So I might come in and say, okay, I'm going to do, let's say trap bar deadlift 275 for sets of 5. And instead of saying like, 5 to 7, I'm going to do, okay, you're going to do that for 6 to 8 sets. Shut it down when you don't think you can get the other one. And what I found is by having the weight the same and giving a range for the sets, I'm able to more accurately predict when I'm going to fail so I can shut it down before I get under a load that I shouldn't be under. And so having the same weight, you have to test it out and figure out. Once I can get to 8 sets, then I increase the weight and I start all over again. And I just keep going up that way and the same weight, but with a set range. And every single day that I go in there, I get to, stop whenever I feel like it. I've been able to get myself into that like good stimulus zone and be able to avoid injuries.
Yep. Well, and that's where I'm definitely more of the, I won't say the Mike Menser camp because that's what people will recognize. But I was always a little bit of a hit power lifter. Remember Ken Leistner?
Mm-hmm.
Does that name ring a bell? Because Ken was that way. Ken was like a Nautilus power lifter, one set to failure. I did that as a lifter and had really good success with it. So very, very low volume. Basically, like if we did, like say I was going to squat 4 or 5 for 5, I would do 135 for 5, 225 for 5, 315, maybe for 2 or 3, and then 4 or 5 for 5 bracket. If I got 4 or 5 for 5, I'm done till next week. And next week I'm going to do 410. And that was like, I was like a straight one heavy set progressive resistance guy. I never really backed too far away from that, even as I started to train athletes, because one thing I found, it's very time efficient.
Oh, it's way more time efficient for sure, but I think mine is way better than yours.
From a business standpoint,
time efficient, yeah.
Time efficient really matters because we have 36 minutes to lift. And if we want to get in, like in our situation, if we think we want to push, we want to pull, we want to do a knee dominant exercise, we want to do a hip dominant exercise, we want to do 2 or 3 core exercises.
Yep.
We want to do maybe some sort of hamstring assistance exercise. We are by nature, it plays into what I want to do, which is a lower number of sets.
Yeah, this will not work in your scenario.
Right. If I was trying to do what you're doing, I'd have to literally redesign my facility and all my programs where every station would allow you to do the same thing. Like the way we design now, it's flow. So like with our athletes, platform, rack, assistance exercise, sort of very conventional, old school.
Like get them through, don't fuck them up, make sure that they get better. That's just like, that's why
platforms, everybody Olympic lifts, you're done with your Olympic lifts, boom, you go to your rack, you do your major exercise in the rack, whatever that is. It might be, bench press, like for us, where, Poliquin pairs kind of thing. Bench press, trap bar deadlift, or chin up, trap bar deadlift. Boom, move to the third area, assistance exercise, whatever your secondary pull is for that day, maybe some sort of, rotational diagonal core. So it's a system that works, 1, for my beliefs, and 2, for my business. So that would be the short answer.
I think it's great. So I'll let you get off here. This has been awesome. I think I like that you're pushing back at some people here, and I've always, I don't know, for 25 years now, I've thought you've been preaching really, really good stuff. And what I like about you, Mike, is, like I said earlier, that you're just really pragmatic. You're dogmatic to the most sensible idea. You're not like, oh no, I'm a high volume guy, or I'm a low volume guy, or I'm a max effort guy. You're always just like, well, this isn't working, and you're willing to sort of change it over. And since you've been doing this for so long, I think that the system that you've come up with is pretty brilliant. So I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate you hopping on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, I could talk to you all day, but I do eventually have to get back to real life here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, and we'll see you soon.